Hello, and welcome to the Shurley English Workshop Series. Today's topic will be sentence structure activities. Today we will discuss 8 sentence structure activities that will help your students learn to physically manipulate various parts of a sentence. The activities I will show you today are entitled Word Bank, Sentence Display, Sentence Flow, Line Up, Human Sentence, Make a Sentence, Crack the Sentence Code, and Sentence Architect. These brain-based activities will help students transfer important information into their long-term memory in a fun and exciting way. Kinesthetic learners will also flourish using these tactile activities. Structure is an important element in many undertakings. In fact, we use our knowledge of structure every day. Structure is defined as the arrangement of and relations between the parts or elements of something complex. It is looking at the various parts that compose the whole of something, whether that is in architecture, geology, biology, sociology, or any entity that contains a whole made from a specific plan of various parts. The same thing is true about sentence structure. Planning how to put the parts of each sentence together to create a smooth piece of writing, or to speak effectively, is extremely important. In our curriculum, sentence structure is taught in a concrete, sequential way according to a time-proven plan. So the activities that I plan to show you can be incorporated into your lesson plans immediately. Because building a better writer begins with helping students understand the way words work together in a sentence to make sense. This building process begins with grammar. Grammar is the vocabulary for writing. In order to talk about sentences, students need to know the names of the parts they will be using and what to do with them. In addition to gaining essential grammar knowledge, students begin to realize that sentences are the foundation of writing. Therefore, students must not only learn how sentences are constructed or put together, they must also learn how to improve and expand the sentences that they write. After students learn how to construct, improve, and expand sentences, they learn how to combine sentences into paragraphs and paragraphs into essays. In most of the activities I will show you, students will learn how to work together in cooperative learning groups. Our curriculum will teach them the rules for discussion so they can learn to work together respectfully and attentively. Let's run through a short overview of how our curriculum sequentially teaches students about the structure of sentences. Students will learn the structure and vocabulary used to identify different types of sentences. Students learn about clauses. Clause is a special grammar name given to a group of words with a subject and predicate. Clauses are used to make different types of sentences. You'll find them in all sentences, whether they are simple, compound, or complex. Students will learn that there are 2 kinds of clauses, an independent clause and a dependent clause. An independent clause has a subject and a predicate, expresses a complete thought, and can stand alone as a sentence. Example, the cat walked into the house. A dependent clause has a subject and a predicate, but does not express a complete thought and cannot stand alone as a sentence. It depends on an independent clause in order for it to make sense. Example, when the cat walked into the house. An independent clause, or a simple sentence, makes complete sense with the subject noun and an intransitive or action verb. The clause just needs a capital letter and an end mark to become a sentence. The first activity I would like to show you is called Word Bank. This activity will help your students develop a sentence blueprint. You simply create a word bank for your students that has the words categorized into the parts of speech that you've taught them thus far. You can see here that this teacher has already taught the subject, noun, verb, adverb, and adjective. The directions say to categorize words by part of speech in a word bank. Students will use the word bank to manipulate the parts of speech to build sentences. Students will use the word bank to assist them in building their sentence blueprints. The students can use the word bank to create their own sentences by manipulating the words in the categories. When they write the sentence, they will add the capital letter and end mark. The students can also use the words to create their own sentence following the labels and directions in the sentence blueprint. This methodology helps your students build sentence sense along with revision skills. It includes the modifiers that they're learning about that modify the core part of a simple sentence. The second activity goes right along with the first one. It is called Sentence Display. In this activity, supporting simple sentence structure, the teacher has partners create classified sentences on sentence strips. Then the sentences can be displayed on a bulletin board for all students to see and learn. As an addition to this activity, the third sentence structure activity is called the Sentence Flow Connection. You can divide your students into small teams of about 4 members each. Each group is designated to present each question and answer flow part that you've covered so far, such as the subject-noun part, the verb part, the adverb part, and the adjective part. Students practice with their sentences so it flows smoothly with no hesitation between group turns. This is an excellent way to sharpen the students' neural connections and to avoid sequence problems with the question and answer flow. This activity is extremely valuable for visual and auditory learners. Next, students learn that a simple sentence with compound parts is made from an independent clause. Here the simple sentence has a compound subject. Conjunctions and compound parts are very useful because they keep writing flowing smoothly by eliminating repeated parts. An independent clause can also have a compound verb. Eventually, students are taught that almost any part of speech can be compound, but compound subjects and verbs are the most common. Let's take a look at the fourth activity called Lineup. This activity will allow the students to experience physical manipulation of the compound parts of a simple sentence to help the brain to engage alternate pathways to get the information into long-term memory. Divide your students into 2 teams. They make up a simple sentence with no compound parts. The next student in line should repeat the sentence with the addition of 1 compound part. Continue until everyone has had a turn. Here the students created a simple sentence with a compound subject. Here's the same activity where the students made a simple sentence with a compound verb. To support students as they learn about other parts of speech being compound, you can create cards for the conjunctions and, or, and but. Then have your students make compound parts with the conjunctions. Your students will benefit from the visual and kinesthetic support. Next, they can use the compound parts in sentences. Using the compound parts in sentences will help to reinforce their meaning and function as students utilize them in their own writing. Students are shown how they can combine 2 independent clauses to create a compound sentence. The word compound means joined together or made of 2 or more parts. Students are taught the definition of a compound sentence. Let's review it briefly. A compound sentence is the result of 2 independent clauses being joined together. They are shown the 3 ways to make compound sentences by joining 2 independent clauses. They can use a coordinate conjunction, use a semicolon, or use a connective adverb. Let's look at an example of each. Here students make a compound sentence using the coordinate conjunction but, making sure they place a comma between the 2 independent clauses. The CD tells you to write a compound sentence. The comma tells you to put a comma between the 2 clauses. The but tells you which coordinate conjunction to use. The list of coordinate conjunctions is categorized according to the reason for joining together the 2 independent clauses. Here, students make a compound sentence using a semicolon. The CD tells you to write a compound sentence. The semicolon tells you to put a semicolon between the 2 clauses. Here's the compound sentence using a semicolon to join the 2 independent clauses. Finally, students are shown how to make a compound sentence using a semicolon, a connective adverb, and a comma. The CD tells you to write a compound sentence. The semicolon tells you to put a semicolon between the 2 clauses. The therefore tells you which connective adverb to use. The comma tells you to put a comma after the connective adverb. This partial list of connective adverbs is categorized according to the reason for joining the two independent clauses. Students appreciate this visual, which shows the three ways to join two independent clauses to form a compound sentence. The fifth activity I want to show you is called Human Sentence. This activity helps students manipulate sentence parts to make a compound sentence using the three different ways. Number 1. On sentence strips, write two simple sentences that can be combined into a compound sentence with one sentence on each strip. Number 2. Write two large periods, two large commas, and a semicolon on separate sheets of stiff paper. Number 3. Write conjunctions and connective adverbs on separate sheets of stiff paper. Number 4. Teach your students a funny, easy-to-make sound for periods, commas, and semicolons. And number 5. Select a student to hold each of the cards you have made. The directions are: Number 1. Have the two students holding the sentence strips go to the front of the class. Number 2. As the class reads each simple sentence aloud, have the students holding the two periods go to the end of each sentence as they are read. The class should make the sound for each period as the sentences are read. Number 3. Announce compound sentence time. Both students with the periods should leave. Number 4. As the class reads the compound sentence, the students with the correct punctuation should take their place as the sounds for their punctuation mark are made. Number 5. If needed, the conjunction or connective adverb is added. Let's go through this again with our student helpers. Have the two students holding the sentence strips go to the front of the class. As the class reads each simple sentence aloud, have the students holding the two periods go to the end of each sentence as they are read. The class should make the sound for each period as the sentences are read. Announce compound sentence time. Both students with the period should leave. As the class reads the compound sentence, the students with the correct punctuation should take their place as the sounds for their punctuation mark are made. If needed, the conjunction or connective adverb is added. Now the compound sentence reads: The snowstorm was unexpected, but we were prepared. One of your students will probably notice the capital W that needs editing. Now your very particular students in your class should be pleased. Let's go through another example. Have the two students holding the sentence strips go to the front of the class. As the class reads each simple sentence aloud, have the students holding the two periods go to the end of each sentence as they are read. The class should make the sound for each period as the sentences are read. Announce compound sentence time. Both students with the periods should leave. As the class reads the compound sentence, the students with the correct punctuation should take their place as the sounds for their punctuation mark are made. If needed, the conjunction or connective adverb is added. The physical movement with the punctuation marks and the conjunctions and connective adverbs will help your students to remember the structure of a compound sentence. Each time you go through this activity, it will help your students learn the three different ways to structure compound sentences. Beginning in Level 3, students learn how to combine thoughts to create complex sentences. A complex sentence is made by joining an independent clause with a dependent clause. Of course, along the way, students are taught about sentence fragments when a sentence is missing one of the essential parts. Now we will discuss how our curriculum teaches students about the structure of complex sentences. Students learn that complex sentences contain an independent clause joined with a dependent clause. If a clause begins with a subordinate conjunction, it is called a dependent clause. It cannot stand alone as a sentence and needs to be combined with an independent clause to make sense. Here is a list of some common subordinate conjunctions. Students have learned that when a subordinate conjunction is added to the beginning of a simple sentence, that sentence becomes a fragment because it no longer expresses a complete thought. It is now called a subordinate or dependent clause. There are two ways to join a dependent clause to an independent clause. If the dependent clause is first, add a comma after it. If the dependent clause is last, add a period after it. No comma is needed between clauses. This guideline is a wonderful visual reminder of the two ways to construct complex sentences. Many of your students will find it a helpful review as they work on constructing complex sentences. Now let's look at our next activity to help your students manipulate sentences and think critically about the structure of complex sentences. It's the sixth activity on our list, and it's called Make a Sentence. The actual physical movement of the sentence parts will help your students to retain the information about how the sentences are structured. The objective is that students will work together to create a complex sentence. Students will show mastery of joining the clauses both ways, one with the dependent clause first and one with the independent clause first. They will create two complex sentences, including correct word placement, correct capitalization, and correct punctuation. So the directions are, students will take two clauses and join them together correctly to create a complex sentence. They will make one complex sentence with the dependent clause first. They will make another complex sentence with the independent clause first. Your students will need the list of subordinate conjunctions, sentence strips, and markers. They can use the list as a reference to write the ones they choose to use on the sentence strips with the markers. Let your groups cut up some sentence strips to make punctuation marks. They need periods and commas. The point is that they use the knowledge they have to choose their own structure and use it correctly, which includes the use of punctuation. Next, give your students two related sentences to combine together in various ways to create a complex sentence. Now you can witness your students applying the knowledge they have gained about sentence structure as they creatively design sentences with purpose. Have each group share their creations. Here is one way to combine the two sentences to create a complex sentence. This group used the subordinate conjunction as to join the two thoughts together. Here is another way to create two complex sentences, joining the two clauses with the subordinate conjunction after. This group chose to use the subordinate conjunction before to make their complex sentences. Notice the correct use of punctuation. Here the group chose to use the subordinate conjunction even though to make their complex sentences. This group chose to use the subordinate conjunction while to make their complex sentences. Before we look at the directions for the seventh activity I have for you today, called Crack the Sentence Code, let's discuss an important method used in Shurley English to teach students how to follow directions in designing complex sentences. When you teach your students about complex sentences, you will teach them to crack the code, or labels, after the run-on sentence. The code tells them how to correct the run-on to create a complex sentence. In this example, the students will create a complex sentence using the subordinate conjunction before in front of the first clause. Using the code, the complex sentence becomes, "Before Marie bought popcorn, the movie began." In this example, the code tells the students to create a complex sentence using the subordinate conjunction before in front of the second clause. First, the run-on is divided. Using the code, the complex sentence becomes, "Marie bought popcorn before the movie began." Students will use this knowledge of deciphering the code to create complex sentences in Crack the Sentence Code. Now let's look at the directions for Crack the Sentence Code. Number 1. Explain that their mission is to crack the sentence code they have been given with their run-on sentence. The code will be on the back of the run-on sentence. Number 2. Each group will create a complex sentence using the code on the back of the run-on sentence. They will write the complex sentence on another sentence strip. Number 3. When it is their turn, the group will share the run-on sentence with the complex sentence under it. The class has to guess the code that the group followed to create the complex sentence. You will need a different run-on sentence for each group with the code on the back for their complex sentence. The words shown in green here would only be found on the back of the run-on sentence. Students will also need sentence strips and markers. Each group will show their skill at taking the run-on sentence and turning it into a complex sentence as they use the code on the back. When it is their turn to share with the class, they will show the run-on sentence with the complex sentence they created using their code. The other groups need to discuss what code was used to create the complex sentence. Share the results with the whole class and discuss. Here the students made a complex sentence by adding the subordinate conjunction where to the second clause to make it dependent. The corrected run-on becomes, the couple sat in the front where they could see their son. Here's another example of a run-on sentence given with the hidden code behind it. This group took the run-on, my brother can draw well, he entered an art contest. They wrote a complex sentence by adding the subordinate conjunction since to the first clause to make it dependent. When the group shares the results with the whole class, the class guesses the code used to join the clauses by comparing the run-on with the newly created complex sentence. As the class guesses the code that was used, it's a practice of reverse thinking. Here's another example of a run-on sentence given with the hidden code behind it. They took a break, they finished their work. They wrote a complex sentence by adding the subordinate conjunction after to the second clause to make it dependent. When the group shares the results with the whole class, then the class guesses the code used to join the clauses by comparing the run-on with the just made complex sentence. Our last activity is Sentence Architect. This should be a crowning challenge for your students as they will be utilizing all the accumulated information that they have gained about the structure of sentences. They will follow the directions to take an unpunctuated paragraph and rewrite the paragraph on chart paper. They will correct fragments, improve short sentences, and improve long rambling sentences. They will use different kinds of sentences with the color code system. Color code simple sentences in black, color code compound sentences in blue, color code complex sentences in red. Students will need an unpunctuated paragraph, chart paper, and markers in black, blue, and red. After you have reviewed the directions, give each group the unpunctuated paragraph, chart paper, and markers in black, blue, and red. Each group will work together to redesign the paragraph with improved sentence structure. Students will use the skills they have learned to work together in a group successfully. Here is one way that your students may design the paragraph. Notice any simple sentences are in black, any compound sentences in blue, and any complex sentences are in red. This group chose to combine the first two clauses to create a complex sentence. Next, they combined two simple sentences with a comma and the conjunction and to create a compound sentence. Here, two simple sentences were combined to create a complex sentence. Here, the clauses were combined to create a complex sentence. Here, the dependent clause was joined with an independent clause to create a complex sentence. Finally, two simple sentences were left as simple sentences. Your students should enjoy comparing the various ways that each group chose to design the sentences as the sentence architects of the paragraph. These two groups began the paragraph the same way, by combining the first two clauses to make a complex sentence. The first group here made the next two clauses into two simple sentences. The second group combined them to make a compound sentence. The first group here made the next two clauses into a compound sentence. The second group created a complex sentence. Both groups here created complex sentences from the two clauses. They just used different subordinate conjunctions. The first group used since, the second group used because. Both groups here made complex sentences. They just reversed the order of the clauses. The first group here made the next two clauses into a compound sentence. The second group made two simple sentences. You could display the paragraphs created by the groups so your students can observe the choices made by each group. Our goal is to assist our students so they use all the various types of sentences in their writing. Today we explored 8 sentence structure activities. These activities are designed to spice up your classroom and keep the learning process alive. The more your students manipulate the structure of sentences, the more they will gain improved sentence fluency and improve confidence in their writing ability. Thank you for attending this edition of the Shurley English Workshop Series. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel to view all of our language arts instructional videos. For more information about our curriculum, please visit us at www.shurley.com.